Hi, good day, everyone. You're very much welcome to Servio Gbadamosi's long-running series, The Poems I Love. I am Ndubuisi Martins Aniemeka, and on this show, I'll be partly commenting on some of the poems that have really made so much impression on me in the last 2, 4, 5, 6 years. And it's not to say that at this continent, some of the great masters of the genre, I think of T.S. Eliot as an immortal poet, one of my great influences, one poet I'd always enjoy reading. And one particular, of course, everybody who has read English poetry would have names like William Wordsworth, names like John Donne, and in Ireland, Henry Seymour, and several other writers. But for me, T.S. Eliot cuts it. And each time I find the time to read the 4 quartets, I am almost always impressed by the craft of the lines, especially Burnt Norton. Time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. What might have been is an abstraction, remaining a perpetual possibility only in a world of speculation. What might have been and what has been points to one end, which is always present. Footfalls echo in the memory, down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened, into the rose garden. My words echo, those in your mind. But to what purpose, disturbing the dust on a howl of rose leaves? I do not know. Other echoes inhabit the garden. Shall we follow? Quick, said the bird. Find them, find them. Round the corner, through the first gate, into our first world. Shall we follow the deception of the thrush into our first world? There they were, dignified, invisible, moving without pressure over the dead leaves. In the autumn heat, through the vibrant earth, and the bird called in response to the unheard music hidden in the shrubbery, and in the unseen eye beam crossed. For the roses had the look of flowers that are looked at. This excerpt, because of course it's a long poem, I'm reading this excerpt, stopping at that point because I have several other poems that appeal to me. Yes, the next one I would say after reading T.S. Eliot should be Wanderer Cantos. Yes, Remi Raji is one of the impressive poets we have in Nigeria. Of the 3rd generation, people Adesomi and Norton, called 3rd generation poets. Such poets actually began with Harry Garuba's collection in 1988. That's collection that produced some of the finest third generation Nigerian poets like Ezena, Chidwezena, I think, of course, Oluokuibe, and a number of them. Harry Garuba edited poetry from the fringes. So Remi Raji is a product of that particular class of poets, and he is one of the leading voices. His poetry has been translated into 6 or 7 languages of the world, and Wonder Cantos is his 7th collection after Sea of My Mind, which I actually wrote several essays on when I was doing my master's. So Wonder Cantos, I particularly enjoy the news in brief 23. The news in brief. This violence multiplies every passing hour. New cyclops prey on a climate of fears. Famine is the new famine. When death locks in the shrub, a cudgel to a hoe, a dagger to the seed. AK-47 is our new fertilizer. So we feed on Old Testament of old havocs, of old nauseas. Rough men behead themselves like tubers to plant. Clever men say new heads will sprout where they see blood. The road is famished. The forest is famished. The river is ravaged. Only the echoes of fear remain. Only the remains of fear echo. This is actually a poem that relates to the socio-cultural climate in Nigeria. The herdsmen rampage in our farms, in our forests, especially the dreaded killer herdsmen that would of course sack villages, rape women, and kill farmers for their cows to feed. So this poem is just picking on such contemporary issue, and it looks very important in recent arguments about conflict and conflict zones in Nigeria. I'd move to unnoticed presence of things. Actually, taking on, apart from reading T.S. Eliot, I do not consider the selection I'm making put into ranking or any hierarchical order. I mean, some of the recent poems I have read, Wonder Cantos that I've just read to you, Unnoticed Presence of Things by Utibe, Hanson. This collection won the 2023 Anna Poetry Prize, and it's such a gorgeous work. And I like a particular poem here, a very brilliant work. It says, How to Spell Nothing. There is a lion in the way dew dripped, with a mind of rage it roars, but the sound splits into different tones, each with its meaning. There is a poem in the mouth of death, and dream is threatened by the mass of sleep. Nothing looks like nothing without color, like the face of God in our hearts, without shape like water in its confusion when mixed with oil. There is a toad in the way dust-covered painting in daylight from a long chase of nothing. Peace is confusion to warriors. There is a story in the mouth of the dumb and the deaf waiting to listen. Brilliant like the vision of a closed eye and the relish of a sword brandished in sunlight. There is a python in the way grass covered and tangled by roots. It eats its tail, unknowing, yet in vain to untangle. There is a demand on the lips of kids, pure like the rhythm of a hymn, a call for innocence, tainted with suit, yet the color of evil is not black. There is a horse in the way, and there is fire in its eyes. There is a man in the way, and there is nothing in his hands. How to spell nothing takes on several state of affairs that one will find at the heart of nothingness that underlines the sort of writing that Utibe Hanson does in his unnoticed presence of things. Basically, he picks on very random issues and it clearly articulates the sort of contradictions that you find about human thoughts. As he says, with a mind of rage, it roars, but the sound splits into different tones, each with its meaning. What he does is to probe some of the contrasting situations, state of affairs that a poet usually ponders on. And then you find there is a poem in the mouth of death, and dream is threatened by the mass of sleep. Nothing looks like nothing without color. I find this poem actually highly experimental, with the poet trying to suggest several other ideas about the kind of contrast one who is a deep thinker is very much comfortable with. I would have read Clinical Blues poems by Dami Ajayi next, but of course I want to steer some kind of controversy after reading Servio Gbadamosi's A Tributary in Servitude, the section A Voyage Around Tears. The first poem there is Testament. My memory is a myriad of shadows, dark wailing shadows. 1,000 needles hide by the edge of its eye, shooting raining fire as if I killed the Jew. Sometimes it turns serpentine with brass sinister fangs crawling speedily towards my future, a young ripening yoke terrorizing me. The raw calibration of earthquakes on the blood of my marrow may not baffle you when you come visiting. Tender as they are, for they are not a tourist attraction, my witnesses are the castles of human trade. This particular poem reminisces on the poet's you would call scars of memories, and such memories that are somewhat alternating, somewhat shifting, so that grasping some moment would appear difficult. It would look like a poet singing in the pool of delusion. In the pool of delusion, of course, that reminds me of some of the poems in Jumoke Verissimo's The Birth of Illusion. A lot like that, but this particular collection is something that is as striking as Servio Gbadamosi's second, which I would quickly read. The first poem, the one he calls Judas, his second book. A stretch-marked body springs from a broom bunch, forked, disparate, frayed as chewing stick, thrice soaked in mouth vial, then spat, muffin into prying mounds. shouts of sin or hurried prayers, a lighter gray drawing the world to itself. There is no end to this night of mutterings, supplications, knees built into the ground, bones nailed to the doorpost of torment. The house of prayer burns still. Incense fills the archangel's nostrils. His heart breaks, then mends itself to break again. Judas, you would say, must have been picked from that folk character in the story of Christ's Judas, so to say, that is betrayal. But this is not this is not exactly this case. Somewhat, the poem plays so much on defamiliarization, bringing to such question that undulating feeling of guilt at some point, and undulating feeling of confused states of mind because of very deep introspection about things that had probably tortured the poet's mind as he was thinking about various things that challenges his life in this post-colonial space in Nigeria. I find him querying a lot of the happenings around that period in his life. So I'm here to make a very categorical statement, which is somewhat supported in some literary circles about this program, The Poems I Love. I would rather say, I mean, if Servio Gbadamosi, my friend, will indulge me to say that Charles Oburumu is the best Nigerian poet writing today. I do not say this as a careless statement. I have said this after reading two of his unpublished collections of poems, and the only person I can compare with respect of the depth of his metaphors and the richness of his language would either be Christopher Okibo or Frank Chipasula, or probably the Congolese poet of very resounding imaginative depth that you could think of. But of course, emerging in the collection that won the Silaman book first book prize for African poets, Origins of the Sima Species, Charles Oburumu's collection of poems, first book. I mean, you would find the selection by whoever judged that prize compelling. You would find this selection really compelling if you read a number of the poems in this collection. I pick, for example, the poem in book 1, which is Emerging. The night enters my solitude through the Romanic clock on my wall. A warm circle of lamp gives light to the 1,000 words before me. The great Langston's poetic, not political, on a desk. The window opens a new river. A still bed accentuates the meaning of sleep at the far end. Childhood and towboats reveal the art of a wall gecko using the silhouettes as its trap. A moth flies in semicircles, afraid of the dark. The holy shelf wants a torch, a simple church, a worship. My mind, like fingers, flip through the people, their historical facts, was the geography of love. I give all the glory to the first book I read at the age of 5. My very first entry into lightness. Glory to you, Aurora, still open to me, colorful like photo albums at 32. Legendary is its broken spine, covered yet in gold dust. The never closes, never opens, though like St. Gertrude's hands clasped in prayer. It is the most blessed image of my father's past, the horizontal purple in its oaken shelf, sharing love and history, light and darkness, with Achebe's things fall apart. Now a glass house. This building as Christine, Biafra's mistress, repainted it with defunct phrases. Now this poem, which is long, reminisces on first and foremost the poet's personal unconscious in relation to his literary genesis, in the way he has conceived writing. And some of the metaphors he picks in these poems relate historically to things that can be publicly verifiable or publicly fetched from our collective memory of reading of Biafra, and virtually of the kind of life that one will find obtainable in the 1980s and 90 and beyond. Before then, where reading and personal reflection on what one must have read became somewhat fanciful, unlike in recent times, where of course with globality or the globalization of the internet, reading, especially of print copies, would be seen as some sort of torture or something not too familiar, except for some very curious, avid readers who continue to unearth gems in the print culture or print books. My collection, I don't know why I'm so much in love with this particular poem. People have different views about this collection. Answers through the Bramble. People say Nigeria is a badly behaved poem. Is their best. But for me, I think the poem that I've written that I like, as we come to the end of this series in the poems I love, is what the surgeon is incapable of. Poetry holds the great spirit in its clinking plane, that mystic's fire and the sudden cause of silent grieving lines, loud with laments. He is skilled, his saw genius cuts the skin and stitches arteries. From pain to gain, there you see the link of palpable gods and masked medics. He calms tremors, upsets same in esoteric scribblings, not forgetting the trade. He disembowels many tribes of beings, but he shrinks at something. For all, he slices through alleys, fills pit holes of silence in muffled cries, and stops seizures, fretting cracks, and still boasts Siamese tranquil. From Hopkins to Luth, from the marrows of times and climes, but he shrinks at one thing. Poetry holds the great spirit in its clinking plane, that mystic sphere and the sudden cause of silent grieving lines, loud with laments. I will skip some movements within the poem, and I would come to the the penultimate and the last. Great physician, Apollo's very state, pondering, being savvy and stoic, but he shrinks at something. As Hippocrates' clone, can you ever truly hold that last nod? The silence that now holds the once eloquent wind? Can you hold that thing? Can you hold death? Can you hold death? You cannot. No one can arrest death. And I close this session with the reading of that poem and asking you that question: if there is a way you can cease to be mortal. And this is what this poem probes: the idea of mortality. The physician can rescue people who are ill, but can they actually kidnap death? That's a question. That's something to reflect upon. Thank you for joining me on this session on the poems that I love. And I thank very much my friend Servio Gbadamosi for giving me the opportunity to do this. Thank you. And you will be very excited to hear the next poet continue in this conversation, in this reading of the poems I love.